Good morning, I hope you're having an absolutely fantastic day. So it's halfway through the month, which means it's time for one of my album reviews, and usually I would pick something that you had suggested to me last month, but this month I thought I would actually review Alt J's new album, Relaxer. Next month will definitely be a review based on one of your recommendations, but I've been a huge fan of Alt J since their very first album, and I thought that I couldn't miss an opportunity to talk about their latest release. These are two of my favourite albums, and I was really looking forward when they announced that they were going to be releasing a new one, to hearing how it would sound, how they would have developed, and especially purely based from the artwork, I was interested to see which way they'd go, because while very different, these two artworks they at least look like they're by the same band, but the artwork for Relaxer looked very different. It looked like they'd completely kind of changed their sort of image in a way, if you could even say that. They don't really have a specific image anyway. But yeah, I was really keen to listen to it for months, so let's talk about Alt J's new album. So track number 1, 3WW, is a really interesting opener for the album. It starts off with this almost unnecessarily long intro that at first I was a bit skeptical of, but it did become really sort of hypnotic the more I listened to it, and I thought it was really interesting how the first vocals that you hear on this are from the keyboard player instead of being from their lead vocalist. It's a soft, slow burning song, but there are also these really intense bursts of sound that come in every now and then. Really interesting choice for the opener of the album, as well as being their first single, but it is good, and the music video for it is fantastic. If anyone feels like explaining to me what the music video is about, please let me know down there. Track number 2 is called In Cold Blood. Now this is a total contrast to the opening track. This is a really sort of powerful, percussive, rhythmic piece. This is more of the Alt J that I expected. It kind of reminded me a little bit of Left Hand Free from their previous record. Musically, it's not hugely adventurous, but it's fast-paced enough to never get boring, and I really like the contrast between the horns and the keyboards. And they've utilized that classic Alt J tradition of using binary in their lyrics. It's a cool song, another really interesting, if not slightly bizarre video. Now, at this point through listening to the album, I was enjoying it, but I wasn't impressed in the way that I had been. Even with the opening track from This Is All Yours, my mind was blown by just that one song, and that hadn't happened to me at all up to this point. So then we move on to track number 3, which is a cover of House of the Rising Sun. Now, in all honesty, I have never been a fan of artists using covers on their actual albums, and I was super skeptical of what I would think of this, especially considering the prestige of the original, and the intentionally lo-fi kind of toy instrument sounds that introduced the track made me even more skeptical. I thought it was going to be a load of pretentious nonsense, but the strings, when they come in, are absolutely gorgeous. It builds and ebbs and flows really well, and in all honesty, it's pretty good. I still very much feel like they didn't need to make a cover. I feel like they could have just actually written another original song in that style or with that instrumentation, and I would have kind of held it in higher regard somehow. Maybe that's just me being a bit silly, I don't know. I mean, it's really good. It's just, I kind of feel like with a band like Alt J, they're talented enough to write their own music, and as much as it's their own interpretation, and they have done some really interesting things to it, I still feel like, why didn't you just write your own song? That being said, some moments in it are genuinely fantastic, especially, and I know I've mentioned this already, but the production on the strings in that is just phenomenal. It sounds really good. On to track number 4, Hit Me Like That Snare. Now there's a contrast between House of the Rising Sun and Hit Me Like That Snare in the same way that there's a contrast between 3WW and In Cold Blood. There's like a nice soft mellow song followed by a really punchy one. The organ you can hear in it reminds me quite a lot of The Doors, and it's kind of cool, but it's really weird, and I can't quite decide yet if that's a good or a bad thing. The very different and somewhat obnoxious vocal styles used on this track kind of make it sound to me like he's trying to be ironic, but it's not really coming off very well. I'm kind of undecided on this one at the moment. Sometimes I'll listen to it and think, actually that's really good, really interesting, and other times I'll listen to it and just think it's a little bit shit. I do like the ending though, and I think that the lyrical repetition with the underlying chord progression does work really well. Track number 5 is called Dead Crush. Starts off with a really cool beat with a nice bass synth underneath it. It's kind of got some hip hop vibes to it, and this is the kind of experimentation that I really like seeing in Alt J. This sounded obviously different from stuff of theirs that I'd heard before, but retained a lot of the same characteristics of their older sound. To be honest, I don't have a huge amount to say about Dead Crush. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a good song. I wasn't a huge fan of the middle 8, but other than that, it was good. Track number 6 is called Adeline, and it's just classic Alt J, if such a thing even exists. It's got elements of the rhythms used in Blood Flood parts 1 and 2, which I thought was really interesting. I was wondering if they were going to incorporate that at all into Relaxer. The song just flows so perfectly together. Its silky smooth production, lyrical delivery, harmonies and instrumentation just works so well. And when the percussion and what sounds like a children's children's chorus comes in, it's just such a good example of Alt J's weirdness at its greatest. Easily one of my favourite tracks on the record. Number 7, the penultimate track on the album, is called Last Year. It's a slow, soft ballad with some really beautiful lyrics, and a gorgeous female vocal that comes in after a few minutes as well. To be honest, I didn't find this song amazing. I kind of felt like it was maybe a bit of a filler, and there was some good use of clarinet towards the end, but it's one of those ones that I feel like I have to be in like a specific mood to listen to and really appreciate. It was very nice, it just wasn't anything special. At least it wasn't very special on the occasions that I've listened to it thus far, but that may change in the future. The final track on Alt J's third release is called Pleader. Weird intro, really weird intro. In fact, weird song. The very first time I listened to it, for the first sort of minute and a half to 2 minutes, I kind of thought that I was going to hate it and it was going to be a huge letdown at the end of the album. And then when it finished, I was just overwhelmed at quite how enormous and brilliant it was. I absolutely love the orchestral instrumentation and arrangement that's been used on this track. And the swells and the climax of the piece are just insane. Like, I can't really describe it, you really need to listen to that. It's fucking glorious. So in general, I like this album. I think it's a really good release, there are some very strong moments on it, but I don't think it's as good as either of their previous albums. There are some moments that work really well and others that don't work so well. I was excited to hear how their sound would have developed as a band, and I do think that there are examples of that on this record, but the problem is with Alt J, they're such a weird band in the first place, and their sound is so all over the place that it's really hard to pinpoint what development is. And overall, I think this album does demonstrate a bit of experimentation and trying to push boundaries in certain ways, whilst including some of their traditional sounds as well. I just don't think it was doing it necessarily as much as I was hoping it would. But then again, like I said, how can you judge development with a band like Alt J? Anyway, it's good, but it's not quite as brilliant as I would expect from Alt J, but maybe my expectations are too high. I know that I'm going to need to listen to this album a lot more. Their previous 2 albums, I still listen to them now and hear things that I hadn't noticed before and appreciate certain elements that I hadn't maybe done so before, and I just think it's really important with Alt J to give it time to mature. Anyway, my 3 favourite tracks from this are probably Adeline, Pleader, and In Cold Blood. I think those are the 3 current favourites. Thank you so much for watching, and let me know what you think. I would genuinely love to hear other people's opinions and thoughts on this record. Do you agree with anything I've said? Do you disagree with anything I've said? Do you just want to tell me that I'm wrong about all of it? Let me know down in the comments section, and also give me some recommendations for music to review next month as well. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an absolutely fantastic day, and I'll see you very soon.